Good. All right. So I'm going to start off. Guys, we've just got off the keynotes, and as I kind of alluded to in the keynotes, I've been pretty excited to speak to this first speaker here, Felix from Sega. I'll get you to introduce yourself in a second, mate, but I think, like all of us, Sega is one of those brands that just has such a nostalgic feel to it. I myself grew up with the Sega Master System, and I remember spending way too much time on games like Golden Axe 2, which, you know, just it was really cool to come back, in my career and then have the chance to work with the Sega team. It felt like I came full circle. I never got to get a Dreamcast, which I was always sad about. I always had to go over to a friend's place who actually bought the Dreamcast to be able to play that. But maybe you could introduce yourself, a little bit about your role and what brought you to Sega, Felix.
Hello, everyone. My name's Felix. Yeah, I am head of data services at Sega Europe. So it's my team's job and responsibility at Sega to provide accurate and reliable data to teams of analysts and developers across Sega and its studios. So thanks Tim for introducing me. I guess Tim's given a lovely introduction to Sega. So yeah, Sega from Mega Drives and Master Systems and Sonic the Hedgehog of the 90s through to today with movies and games and so much more. Beneath the umbrella of Sega sits a number of cutting edge game studios, including Creative Assembly that make the Total War series of games, Sports Interactive that make Football Manager, 2 Point that make a really fun series of kind of cartoon-like simulation titles, Hardlight that make Sonic mobile games, Rovio now, who are famous for Angry Birds, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's a whole Japanese arm of Sega as well that have a plethora of fantastic studios and titles. So yeah, it's a really fun company to work for. And to work within.
Talk me a little bit about the project and what got you in and to kind of master data management as a solution and a requirement, and kind of why was it important to attack this challenge that you were having from a business perspective?
So master data management has been important for years at Sega, because they have such a variety of sources of data from first parties, Sony, Microsoft, Steam, Nintendo, Apple, Android, and many other partners. Not only commercial data, but we have game analytics data, market research data, customer sentiment data, social media data, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And all of these different data sources store and report on Sega titles and games with slightly different naming conventions. So we've had to have a system in place that allows us to bring kind of have this master list of titles that everything kind of rolls up to. And historically, we've been using SQL Server, MDM
for master data services. Yeah.
For a number of years now, but it's becoming quite antiquated, and we wanted to kind of move our master data forward into the new century. So we were introduced to CluedIn by Microsoft a couple of years ago now, and this project's just been rolling from then. Really, it's been a really good journey.
I think you're talking about a challenge that so many different companies in consumer goods have. This idea of you've got this big master product list of all the products that you sell, and you sell them on different channels. And when they go out, they might go out with internal identifiers, but actually when it comes back from these different channels, they have their own identifiers that don't map up, as you kind of alluded to, localizations, different languages, different character set, misspellings, aliases, colloquial names. And somehow we've got to do this kind of magic of figuring out, I actually think it's supposed to be that. Or actually, I don't think we have that in our list at all. I think that's something new, and we should add that to our master list. I remember on the project, we had this pretty kind of magical moment. Um, and I know that at Sega, you're investing and the team is investing a lot in large language models and AI, and that's a big part of like Sega's um, practices there. But I remember we had this moment where we had DLC coming in, so this downloadable content coming in from channels, and they're, believe it or not, well done to Sega. They're coming in at the speed of light. There are a lot of these transactions that are coming through, so it's very much doing well on channels like Microsoft Xbox and Sony PlayStation, Steam, Epic, just to name a few. But I remember this one came in, and it was just a sorted set one. It was in another language, and at that point, all traditional techniques, they went out the door. There was just, besides having to manage big mapping tables and laborious kind of, oh, it could be that, or even kind of fuzzy approaches where it would overmatch or undermatch. I remember one of our guys from our team that was actually quite, funny enough, was quite new to Clued In. So he was kind of, I don't know, 2 or 3 months into Clued In itself. And he made the suggestion, well, why don't we use one of CluedIn's AI rules to write a prompt that just says, or given this input, why don't you try and find the associated game in this big master list? And we ran it, and it just worked the first go. And I was just, maybe you could make a couple of comments on like, how is AI and CluedIn kind of aligning with your company's strategy, your data strategy, the kind of digital transformation goals that you've got at Sega?
Oh, so that's a challenging question.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think at Sega, the use of AI within the business is in its infancy, and I can't really go into much detail of areas in which it's been used around the business for a number of reasons.
Hmm.
However, in this instance, and utilizing AI in a master data management solution like this it's been a game changer, really, because it's made a number of people's lives so much easier, because you're not relying on a human to have to go through all of these
Hmm.
hundreds of different text strings to work out what they might
Yeah.
be, and obviously we're utilizing the AI functionality with CluedIn, so that
Hmm.
we can just send it a name of a video game with the context of it being a video game, and CluedIn is providing really high level, like really high, like I don't know, 90% accuracy of,
Hmm.
based on the fact that this is a video game,
Hmm.
we think it's this, and it's, that's saving someone a few minutes every time it
Hmm.
does that. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure that's a fantastic answer, but it's, yeah, the fact that CluedIn utilizes AI to help us with this mapping process is game changing. Yeah.
It's an honest answer, and I think uh, I think MDM is one of those categories and practices where we know that a human is always going to be important in this loop. And
Yeah.
90% is great. And who knows, as more investment goes into making better, cheaper, faster, smarter large language models, being able to adopt that will be key. But there'll always be the need for the domain experts at Sega. And this is really, I guess, where the scale part is really important. Is it's so nice to kind of see these non-matches even go out and be federated out into the business. Where, listen, we tried. There's not even
Yeah.
anything close to this. I need to involve someone that knows the catalog, that knows the games, that knows that Sonic has a pink polka dot DLC in Sony PlayStation, and be that person that says, yeah. I mean, AI would have never told you this. It's not general knowledge, but it's really about bridging the business with the IT. So that's been really kind of, I guess, cool to see. What do you think? What do you think helped made your decisions with Cluedin itself? Obviously, there's a lot of you're from a data engineering background, so there's a lot of engineering tools. I know that you're a big user of things like Azure Databricks and other parts of the Microsoft ecosystem as well. What do you think it was specifically that when met with the challenge, you thought that CluedIn was a good fit into the Sega kind of ecosystem?
The fact that CluedIn integrates with all of the different technologies that Sega's using at the moment. So
Right.
our Azure Azure data warehouses, etc. But we also have a massive on most of the engineering that goes on at Sega is done using within Databricks.
Yep.
But we now have a flow between CluedIn and Databricks. So we've got flows into various different data sources from CluedIn, which is fundamentally what this master data approach is about, and it's kind of giving this consistent set of master data to all of our different data sets around the business. So I think it's the fact that it integrates with all of the technologies that Sega are using. It integrates with loads of other technologies that Sega aren't using as well, but I'm sure you've already talked about. I think there's a few real key elements of CluedIn that have really just made it stand out from what we had before and what we've seen from other providers. I think the first one is setting up the API endpoints within CluedIn to send data to has made the whole process of getting the data from A to B and getting the data in the master data system itself really easy, because you're just posting the raw data into CluedIn, and then it's sorting it out with no other a very simple process. You've talked about to start with some fantastic matching algorithms within CluedIn that we're utilizing. From basic fuzzy matching, but many others that come out of the box with CluedIn. If fuzzy matching isn't sufficient, then we can fall back to AI mapping that we just talked about. So, if CluedIn isn't convinced that it knows what a title is just using matching alone, it then falls back onto AI. If AI can answer the question, which it's possible, does happen, it then can fall back to a human. But within CluedIn, it's utilizing Microsoft Power Apps to send the alerts and communication from the master data platform to users via email, via Teams. So this whole flow has just become so much simpler. So now, if there's a new product or something new's come in from one of the many hundreds of different sources of data that Sega ingest, we know. So I've completely lost my chain of thought.
Onboarding new data sets is just like it's a nice process included, and I would argue, Felix, exactly. It's also it's one of those things that stands out.
Yeah, so I've just remembered my thought process now. But of the hundreds of titles that come in, it fails fuzzy matching. AI can't sort it out. But then we have really nice, easy user interface in Power Automate, which says, "Hey, user, we've received this game. We're really not sure what it is or where it sits within Sega's hierarchy. Here's what we think it might be. Have a look at this list. Is it any of these? If not, potentially you need to add a new title or give us some more context as to what it might be." And all of this is done within a really neat, tidy little Teams update, so it just makes things so much easier compared to the process that was there before.
It's all about that federation. I mean, one of the big focuses we have here at CluedIn is, number one, we think that, making sure that AI is actually producing good, tangible value in that flow is one thing. And we really believe that the vendor that really cracks that is just going to provide the best solution. But the second thing is that federation. It turns out not everybody wants to sit in an MDM system and stare at all day. No, they work in a couple of key channels. They're either in email or they're in Teams, or maybe now they're even on maybe WhatsApp or their phone, or maybe a Copilot, maybe a ChatGPT. That's their terminals in a way right now. Having the ability to not only surface it to the right person in the right way that doesn't even require them to know what CluedIn is. It's just, here's a question that is abstract of that. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's the recommendation and the explanation. but I need you to make that final decision. It was a cool flow that kind of closed the loop that even when I remember seeing it, even when you do make the decision as a data steward, yeah, it's that one. That's what it is. It goes back into the system, and then it knows the next time that if it ever sees that again, I've seen this before, I've learned from it. So it is a cool flow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Set up, Felix, and we've got a couple of channels in there smoothly working. Probably the priority channels that have come in. What are the types of
Yes.
next ambitions of what you'd like to bring into the project? Kind of like, where are you envisaging this going to add more and more value to Sega?
So yes, you're right. We've got a number of sources coming in already, really critical sources for the business because
Mm-hmm.
they're their main sales platforms.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's literally a project that we're working on right now is to align um all of Sega's data sources, into this master data platform. So you mentioned physical retail sales data. That
Mm-hmm.
that's literally within our next couple of sprints of work to get those ingesting via CluedIn to align the master data across those as well. And it's not only kind of the physical sales data you mentioned, like your Walmarts or your Targets or
Yeah.
whatever in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also other systems across Sega as well. So there are systems at Sega that aren't necessarily managed and maintained by our team, but they're very important for processes such as business planning and commercial analysis. They have their own systems, which they obviously utilize. And it's about linking those systems in with the master data process as well, so that we can have this kind of whole global view of all data at Sega based on a single product hierarchy. So we can report across physical sales in the States, like we just mentioned. We can report across how games are selling on PlayStation in Europe, but we can also report across kind of potentially in the business planning system. They have forecasts of where they think sales might go in the future, and this, having a trusted hierarchy of products above all this means that reporting across all these sources with the same level of granularity is going to be achievable. I'm not sure if that covers the question really, but
I think it's an understatement to some degree of how hard this problem is. It is a really hard problem to solve. And I know that Sega's already put a lot of investment in around CluedIn to make even the project go smoother. And I think your previous experience with MDM, with Master Data Services, kind of helped you build that muscle memory. What advice would you give to people starting their MDM journey for like the first time? What advice would you give?
That's another great question. I think, is this people that have, are we talking about potentially people that have not looked at MDM ever? So it's kind of a new concept.
Yeah.
The advice is it's definitely worth it. However, it can seem incredibly daunting prospect at the beginning, because when you start out, nothing's mapped. So it does seem like an overwhelming process to kind of align all of your different data sources to one consistent mapping convention.
Yeah.
However, it's worth putting in the hard yards initially to get it set up, because it really you can't really put into words how it kind of drives forward your reporting across the business.
I mean, a good example, Felix, was that once we actually got that single view of the data, we started enriching it from online sources like IGDB and raw GIO and even Wikipedia and Sega Retro, all of these. And in a way, it's one of those, gaming is one of those industries where we're so lucky with the repository of like online data sources of games where proper fans will sometimes even keep up better master data than the providers
Yeah.
themselves. But having open APIs, I remember us being able to not only bring in ratings, user ratings, comments, the social data, platforms, genres, and you can imagine, to your point, Felix, that allows you to slice and dice, not only for reporting, but even for
Yeah.
automation and things like this as well.
Yeah, I completely forgot about this whole area, Tim. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's going back to your previous question about what advice would you give?
Mm.
I was kind of coming at you of 10 years ago when we were kind of using MDM on SQL Server. It's a slog,
Mm.
but CluedIn makes that whole process a lot easier. So
Mm.
if you're starting from now, I think with CluedIn, I think it's going to be a much more a much easier process to go. And as you say, the enrichment that CluedIn offers on top of the data that we're ingesting. So let's say Sega have, I'm kind of picking a number out of thin air here, but it's somewhere in, there's probably a rough ballpark of 2,000 games, like kind of parent titles.
Yeah.
And within those titles, there might be 10,000 different SKUs or different variations of those titles. And that's to go through each one of those to enrich it manually would take it would take someone weeks or months, and it would probably never actually be completed. But utilizing the APIs that CluedIn has managed to that using CluedIn has allowed us to automate means that for all of those 2,000 or 3,000 titles, we have a release date associated with the title. We have the platforms on which that title was released on, as you've already mentioned and alluded to, genres, sentiment, user sentiment across all of these platforms, all of these titles, automatically kind of stored as metadata on CluedIn against this parent record. So that has fundamentally changed reporting, because not only can you report on title level across the whole Sega data infrastructure, but you can then say, I just want to see what were sales like for RPG genre in the last 2 months, and very quickly filter down by that, which would have been quite a difficult process before this was in place. And so, yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because that's been another really beneficial element of CluedIn.
It's such a fun project. So maybe where I wanted to end in this discussion is first of all, I mean, what were the Sega games that you grew up with? What were they?
So Sega have just moved offices within the last week, and we were asked to pick an avatar for some visuals, and the avatar was meant to be your favorite Sega character. Now, when I was growing up, my favorite Sega game, probably showing my age here, but it was a game called Toe Jam and Earl. And it was,
you know it. It's a goodie.
Oh my God. The amount of hours that me and my brother sunk into that game when I was about 10, so in the early 90s. What a game. So my avatar is a little image of Toe Jam, which is this little skinny alien guy, a red alien. That's I've got loads of happy memories growing up with a Mega Drive and Toe Jam and Earl, amongst a plethora of other Sega titles. What about you, Tim?
No tattoos yet, Felix? No,
Sega
tattoos?
I'm tat free.
Okay. Soon. No, for me, it was Golden Axe 2. That was a big one that I sunk a lot of time into. In fact, it's been nostalgic to go back on the Sega project and see all these old games and just say, played that. It's amazing to see the plethora of titles actually that Sega is responsible and part of right now. Felix, it's been awesome to talk to you. Thank you for joining us at CluedInsight. We've got lots more to do on your project, but for right now, we'll leave and we'll head on to the next speaker. Thanks, Felix.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.